welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, along with my wonderful wife, Janet, and we are streaming live from the Team Needham abode. And we are super excited to have Torkil Færø on our show today. He is a fellow Norwegian, if you can tell. Him and Janet are probably cousins. And streaming live from Oslo, Norway. And we're super excited to be expanding our podcast all over the world. This is the first time we've had a guest from Norway, actually. He's going to be talking about his book, The Pulse Cure: Balance Stress, Optimize Health, and Live Longer. Who doesn't want to do that? So without further ado, Torkil, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much. Very nice to meet you, and even a fellow Norwegian. That's cool.
You as well.
So tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to write this book.
Yeah, I'm a general practitioner in Norway and emergency medicine physician. And I've written a book on how to use wearables like smartwatches, Oura rings, and all these new devices, Whoop bands, and so on, to track heart rate variability and track our stress balance to see if it's sustainable. And the book has been a huge success in Norway. It's been on the bestseller list for like a year and a half.
Congratulations.
And, thank you. And then also translated into English and the other Scandinavian languages and more. So it has been such a useful tool for me, for my own health. And I can see that it's also so useful for so many people, to have a kind of a speedometer for their stress balance and get rid of a lot of the stress symptoms, because as you know, of course, that chronic low-grade inflammation and stress level is one of the big root causes of so many of the lifestyle diseases that we are struggling with these days.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we tell our patients all the time, if you're overly stressed, you're probably not sleeping. And no matter how you eat or no matter how you exercise, you're not going to get well.
Yeah, exactly. And what you soon find out once you start tracking with your heart rate, you find out what you eat will stress you. And then when you are stressed, you will sleep worse. And then the blood sugar will not be normal again. And then it's kind of all intertwined here. So it's all connected. So that's why that's why I wrote the book, because it's about how to sleep, how to exercise, how to regulate your stress. What about alcohol? What about nicotine? And so many of these things that affects the stress level because many of the stress sources come from surprising places. I would never have thought that food would stress me that much and that alcohol would stress me so much. So it's, I think usually when we talk about stress, we think about mental stress, whether we are busy or all these kind of stress. But there's so many stressors that comes from other places, and you can see on the watch, because the heart will immediately respond to any demand. So you can see if there is a demand long before you can notice it yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So do you track heart rate variability, HRV? Yeah,
that's the main thing. And I mainly use a Garmin watch that I heard on one podcast that you also use, with their like body battery system, and where you can see the stress level in the moment. So that's my favorite go-to device. But there are other devices as well, like Oura rings and Whoop bands, and I've tried many different ones and worn them at the same time just to check out, whether they are working correctly or not.
And so tell us about heart rate variability. What is that, and what's a good number to shoot for?
Yeah, heart rate variability is the variation between heartbeats, and it will then tell you whether you are in the parasympathetic restful state, the recovery state, or if you're in the stressful sympathetic stressful state then. Because if you are in the parasympathetic state, when you breathe in, the heart rate will go up a little bit, and when you breathe out, the heart rate will go down a little bit. And you can also feel it if you are very quiet. You can feel it yourself when you breathe in and out. But if you're in the stressed level, then it will beat very steadily like a metronome, regardless of your breathing in or out. So this is what the devices can pick up, and they can give you an estimate of your stress level in the moment, and then of course throughout the day and night and over time. So and with the connection to all of the users and artificial intelligence, they can give very good advice on how to keep your stress in balance. And most people, when they start to track it, they get big surprises. So And it's kind of a gamification. People love to do it. Many people are worried will it not be stressful, but most people find it like more amusing and useful, and that they can have this power over their own health and regulate this is so, it's empowering for people.
For sure. So tell us about heart rate variability. Do you want a high heart rate variability or a low heart rate variability?
Yeah, you want a high heart rate variability as a sign that you have a balanced system that is capable of recovering well. So you have a good connection to your vagus nerve. That is kind of the main nerve involved in recovery. So the better the heart rate variability, the better health in general. And there's so much research on this. You can basically find any disease that you fancy knowing about and couple it with heart rate variability, and you will find research on this, like in cancer, heart disease, dementia, Parkinson, fatigue, whatever symptom. And the lower the heart rate variability as a sign of a lot of demand on the system and the lower efficiency of the immune defense, that will make it easier for the various diseases, lifestyle diseases, to come forward. So it's an important metric to know about. And you asked about the number, and there's like 30 to 50% individual genetic variety here. So you shouldn't look too much and compare it with other people. You should mostly compare it to your own best heart rate variability. What you can do if kind of you find an ideal week where you eat well, don't drink alcohol, don't exercise too much, and so on. So
basically, if your heart rate variability is too low, it means you're in kind of constant sympathetic state. You're in constant fight or flight mode, correct?
Right. That's right.
So Janet, what questions do you have for Torkil?
Well, coming from the lay person side, I think sometimes when we are explaining to people that your cortisol levels are off, just kind of give a synopsis of how that plays out, if it's too high or too low, how that's going to affect their health. Because I think the bottom line is why is it important to me? Like, why should I pay attention to whether my heart is doing, this variability? Because at the end of the day, if they don't understand what the cortisol is doing to their body, it may not connect the dots for them. So just give a little blip on that.
Yeah. So if you have a lot of stress in your life, then you will have a high cortisol level, and maybe after some time, your whole cortisol system, feedback system, can be really off as well. So the more, and of course, it's not easy for most people to measure cortisol, but heart rate variability is a metric that you can get to know. So it's kind of a stand-in for cortisol. So if you can regulate your stress level through the heart rate, because as I said, whether you eat the wrong food, drink too much alcohol, use nicotine like a lot of people do, it can also be like vaping and other ways of getting nicotine. It can be if you're not sleeping well enough, then your heart rate will react to that, all of these things, as it would in cortisol. And particularly for women, this is a big problem. And I know you have podcasts on endometriosis and PCOS and different things, because when the cortisol will have a feedback on the pituitary gland and hypothalamus, it will disturb the reproductive hormones, the female reproductive hormones, and it can make for severe PMS symptoms and endometriosis and polycystic ovarian syndrome. So all of these symptoms, like the person said in that podcast, is coupled to chronic inflammation. And the chronic inflammation will affect the heart rate variability. So the more inflammation, the lower the heart rate variability, as a measure that you're under strain, from any cause. Yeah.
Well, and I just had an aha moment, Dr. Færø. Your book is called The Pulse Cure, and here we are talking about the heart. I'm assuming that's where the name comes from. Is that true?
Yeah,
exactly. Okay, that's awesome. So it makes a lot of sense. And in cortisol, when cortisol is high, you talk about blood sugar regulation in your book. cortisol makes you in stress mode, and then it puts out blood sugar because it makes you think that you're in fight or flight. So high cortisol is just not a good thing.
Exactly. And I also use the CGM, a continuous glucose monitor at times, and then I can eat the same thing in the morning, and after a night of poor sleep, my blood sugar will rise more than on a night where I've been sleeping well. So, and of course, sleep is so important, So, and all of these things are free. All the advice in the book, everything that you need to know to have a healthy life is free. And that is also the problem, because there's not so much commercial pressure behind it, Mm-hmm. So sunshine, exercise, sleeping, meditation, breath work, reducing alcohol, all of these things are so important to stay healthy. And the good thing is that it's very motivating that you can see it in the heart rate. That makes it easier to make the tough choice of going into a cold plunge or fasting or dropping the alcohol when you can see it, on your screen. At least for me, and I know for many people also.
So how would you start, without giving your book away, all the details in your book, how would you start monitoring your heart rate and tracking it to make sure that you're following the right procedures?
Yeah, I would normally advise people not to do anything, so that you have your baseline, so that you don't start right away and do the smart things, because you would want to know how your situation was to start with. So maybe the first month, just register, just pay attention, just see what happens. And then after that, little by little, start implementing one thing at a time, because then you can see what the effect that one thing has on your system.
So you've actually seen on yourself and other people how their blood sugar can be compared to their heart rate variability, or
that will be somewhat related. That will be somewhat related. It will be one of the many things that will affect it, and of course it will be a huge detective work for so many people, because there's so many people on the verge of burnout. In the US and in Norway as well, it's kind of 50-60% of the employees, will have some symptoms of it, and then they will find, like I did and many others, that they are stressed. 80% of the diseases that we treat, it's estimated, has a cause in too much stress and this low-grade inflammation. And the ones who are affected by that will find, when they use the watches and the rings, that they are stressed. And it can be hard work to detangle this. So I spent almost 2 years just trying to find out what was working and not was working. And then, of course, that is some of the answers in the Pulse Cure. And also in this process, we have made a social network with 4,000 members. It's only Norwegian yet, unfortunately. But so I get also a lot. It's not only my readings. I get information from so many other people. And we can also see clearly that it's very individual. So this is a device that will track how you react to certain things. Like the two of you may react totally different to alcohol, for example, or a certain kind of dinner or whatever. So rather than what we are used to as doctors is to get a big research study with 1,000 people and we get the average. And that is what we are kind of talking about. But the average of any research will not matter to you, because you may be totally off this average. So here we get a number on how you react to certain things.
That's a very good point, because a lot of times I think people want just an answer, like for one person, like what should I do? And really it comes down to, you need to find out what works best for you. And the only way you can really do that is if you are a good historian for yourself with using devices like this, because otherwise, you're not going to be objective, I think. I think that's one of the problems we have, is that we throw everything in that basket and we want just one answer. But I think we've been trained that way in medicine for sure. Because if you have somebody that's coming in, for example, that's stressed out, depending on what they are presenting, we're gonna click on a box, right? Like there's just one way to treat this person, but What we're really finding out is that we're very dynamic and that each one of us is going to respond differently. And that's probably why maybe in the last 30 years that what we've been trying to do with chronic diseases hasn't been working so well.
Yeah, we don't have the right medicine for it, and it's of course easier to prevent it than to treat it. So the treatment we have is more relieving the symptoms than going into the root cause. And it's funny that we as doctors, we have been too specialized. So when we have a problem with chronic inflammation, it affects all the mitochondria, it affects all the cells into all the organs, and all the doctors, the specialists, have been kind of focusing on the kidney or the heart or the brain or the muscles or whatever separate organ, or the ear or nose and whatever. But now we see that it's all connected, and the common denominator is low-grade chronic inflammation, and because of stress, and it's our lifestyle that does it. So we're now living in a totally different lifestyle than the one that we were developed under the evolution. So kind of in every way, with whether it's the circadian rhythm, whether it's being in movement, whether it's being outside and getting sunlight and earthing, what we eat, it's all kind of opposite of the way we are constructed. So we are not constructed for this way of living. So, but we don't need to go really back to the savannah and to the jungle, but of course, but if we go somewhat back to that we get some movement, that we improve our sleep, that we eat food that is real food and not ultra-processed food, and many of these things, we can mitigate the stress on our systems and get the good enough balance. Because I don't think that there's so much talk about health optimization, and then you probably have to spend all your time getting optimal health, and I don't have the patience for that. But I think it's important with health normalization, to have a normal health, to have a health good enough that you can do whatever you want, that your health is not in your way, and that you can live as long as you have the potential to live, without spending every minute of the day just focusing on health. But you need to focus on health in some way, because otherwise there will be a price to pay at the other end. And of course, as a doctor, I know it's sad, to see 60, 70, 80 years olds with all their symptoms, with all the restrictions because of a poor health, when you know what they could have done, and that is why I've written the book, that at least so that they can choose themselves, that, okay, at least I will show them what they can do, and it's up to them. I don't care what they do, but it's kind of my duty to explain to them what is possible.
I got to tell you, I love what you talked about, normalizing health, not necessarily optimizing it, because we talk about optimizing health a lot. But you're right. Really what we're doing is we're trying to normalize it, because normal has become people being sick. That's what's normal. We need to get back to 4, 5, 6, 10 generations ago, like you were talking about. And that's what was normal, where you can move when you want, you can sleep at night, you're enjoying the sunshine, you're enjoying food. That's what we need to get back. I'm going to steal that one from you. It's normalizing, normalizing our health.
Yeah, just take it. Yeah.
And I got to tell you, I mean, you are preaching to the choir. You could host our podcast. I mean, because you are just, the things that you're saying are what we talk about constantly. And, we're two pharmacists. So, people would think, well, you must believe in drugs to treat all these diseases. It's like, no, we're just like you are. It's like, it's really pretty simple. Sleep, diet, movement, get outside. Those are really the things you need to do to be healthy. And by the way, I'm going to let you comment on this also. Sleep during the night, not during the day. And as an ER physician, where you work all kinds of hours, tell us about that.
Yeah. So of course, throughout the years, I've been working so much nighttime, even in intense ER units where you're working all the time with like 5 patients waiting for you at all the time, and you're always behind. And of course, I knew through all these years that it was uncomfortable, but that it was dangerous, that I could get cancer from it. It was not known. Of course, now we know that if you sleep less than 6 hours, compared to more than 7 hours, you have double the cancer risk, according to Matthew Walker, who wrote the Why We Sleep book. So it's so much at stake, and people, I used to think I can sleep when I'm dead, like in this way. But of course, now we see that it's not only worse for longevity and health, but it's also worse for performance. So you need the best performers across athletes or business or whatever. They are the best at sleeping also and resting. So we need to have this balance. And of course, as a doctor, part of my job is to write death certificates. And when I see people living into their 90s and 95 and up to 100 and still have their mental brain okay, then I pay attention. And they have never done anything out of the ordinary. They have been moving in a normal way, and so they haven't been doing high intensity training or much of this. So it's like in the blue zones that you, of course, know about, the Dan Buettner, the blue zones around the world where people live to be 100, the centenarians, and they just do that, move naturally. They're social, they're happy, they have a calm about them, and move around naturally. And take care to sleep at night, as you say.
It's not magic. There's no real secret. It's just simple, consistent living like that. And of course, you guys being Norwegian have some pretty good genes to be able to live into your hundreds and be healthy. you Vikings have some good genes.
Yeah. Hopefully, but now we find out that 80, and we used. When I studied medicine, we were told that, okay, disease and death is kind of mainly genetics or bad luck. Now we know that it's not that. It's probably 80-90%. It's your lifestyle. You have control. And most people don't want to hear that. They want the doctor to take responsibility of their health. So I think but this is changing, with your podcast and so many other people's podcasts, that we get to know more about our own health. We educate ourselves so much more. And unfortunately, many of the doctors, they don't pay attention. So they're kind of lagging behind quite a lot. I'm sure you have experienced the same.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things, my mother was a nurse, and one of the things she worked in a nursing home, and one of the things she always said is people that lived the longest had the less medications. And a lot of times the older people that were in the nursing home at that point in time were probably because of maybe a spouse had to be there and they couldn't take care of it, or something like that. But reflecting just over time, I do think there's a difference in our cultures, and I'm not sure if this is in Norway as it is in the United States, but we used to be so connected in the community, whether you were farming or just even in a small town, that, people had more social connections too. And like our lives were very similar in how we lived our day. Like, on the farm, it was very common people stopped in for coffee, and it wasn't like there was some set invitation. It was, you just came together and you discussed and talked, and then after your coffee was done, off we went back to work. And today our culture is a little bit different, I think. How is it in Norway? Is it like the United States, just go, 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 and we don't stop for that moment to take a deep breath? And
It's probably quite similar. It's kind of the Western way of living with the social media where everything's happening. We're chasing dopamine kicks from our phones, instead of the real thing that we used to have. And also the big Harvard study that you probably know about that found out that the most important things for happiness and longevity, that is relationships, to have good relationships. And of course, now there are more people living alone and in single households, both in Norway and in the US, I know. And this have a big effect because this stresses us. And also that is also new to medicine, that being lonely would cause physical disease. Because the lonely people, they die 10, 15 years before others. It's just as dangerous as smoking. And they don't die from depression, or they die from heart attacks, from cancer, from all these stress-related diseases, because our ancient system, in the book, I'm talking about this autonomic nervous system. I call it our inner living fossil, because is ancient. It's like 100, 200 million of years old, and we still carry it at the foundation of our brain, and we still have to take more consideration about it, because when we are stressed, this ancient system in our brains interprets this as we are in danger, we are alone, and it will disturb the immune system and give this chronic low-grade inflammation because of loneliness. And this was, of course, not something we were taught in medical school, to say the least.
And the reality of it is, we were not created to be alone. We were created to be around people. That's it. Those are just the realities. So we're not supposed to be alone.
Absolutely. We were, and the hunter-gatherers, they still exist today, so they can, research, and they are never alone. Hardly when they go to the restroom, or if they have. So they're always together. Yeah. And I just now just today came from having been teaching a photographic workshop for cancer patients, and to see those 25 patients taking pictures together, showing their pictures, and struggling to take better pictures. We're kind of doing what we are made to do difficult things together and solve problems. And just doing that, regardless of how good the pictures will be, it's healthy. It's stimulating our whole nervous system from the bottom up, from the intellectual brain, but also from the instinctive and intuitive brain. So we were kind of satisfied on a very, very deep level, because photography is kind of what we call a deep play. It's not just like playing Yahtzee or Monopoly or something. It's a kind of play, a game. Yeah.
So I got to ask, just going back, I should have asked this, kind of to begin with, but here you are, you're an ER physician, and basically you're writing a book about chronic disease. And, as an ER physician, somebody gets in a car wreck, somebody has a heart attack, you do whatever you can to stabilize them and then refer them somewhere else to manage their disease. So what happened to you? Why?
That's just part of it, because so many people come in with heart attack, with kidney stones, with gallbladder disease, with infections, and even infections will be affected by your autonomic nervous system, by your physiology. So if your immune system is low, you will get more infections. So it's all related. So of course we have all the cuts and bruises and accidents and all of that, but it's also all these other things, having a stroke, having all these other things that will come, in a short notice. So the dramatic side of it is maybe only 10%. That what we really doing most of the time is as a relation to lifestyle diseases, I would say.
Yeah, that's a great point. So as we wind this podcast up, Dr. Færø, tell us what you have a passion for.
I have a passion for getting the most out of life. We get these hopefully 80 plus years on Earth, and to spend them as we want to do, to enjoy it, to seek adventure, to live our life according to what we really want to do. And that's the most important thing to me. So, and then to be able to help people to achieve that, it's of course it gives me satisfaction, instead of doing a lot of what I've been doing in my job for so many years, which just feels like not really solving the problem. So tell us about your book on Amazon. I'm streaming it here, The Pulse Cure, and how people can get it and why they should get it. Yeah, they should get it to get their stress balance in order, and to feel better, and to reduce the chances of getting sick and living longer in a simple way. And then when you can use the heart rate monitors as kind of speedometers and track it and regulate it, it's so much easier. That's why it has been such a bestseller in Norway and being bought from all these other countries. And it's also, I must say, it's also an audio book and an ebook. So many that listens to podcasts, they like to listen to audiobooks, and not so happy about reading. But and if they want to, they can also check out thepulsecure.com, where I have a lecture where I can tell in detail how I use the different devices to track it. So So it gives you power. It moves, and that's important. It moves the power from the doctors and the healthcare system and takes it into your own hands. And it also shifts the focus from after you get sick until before you get sick. Because as doctors, you don't have many biometrics until you're sick.
Right.
But heart rate variability is a metric that can show the risk of getting a disease that you can then also regulate and have control of yourself in real time and aided by artificial intelligence. So this, I think, is just a start. So when they couple it with more information about what you're doing, then it will be even more useful, I would say.
Well, I love it. And the goal of our podcast is just what you said. Is to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health. Mm-hmm. And I think as healthcare professionals, that's what our duty should be. Because people, we as healthcare professionals, whether we're pharmacists or whether we're doctors, we talk to the patients maybe an hour a month, maybe, but they're with their own bodies 24 hours a day. And what they do on a day-to-day consistent basis, hour-to-hour basis matters.
Yeah. And also just the fact that how we could overlook this as doctors, that the heart rate, of course, can be used for so much more than we have done over the years. Of course, the ancient doctors, they knew this. The Egyptians, the Greeks, the Indian and Chinese, they knew that from the pulse, from the heart rate, you could tell so much about our inner system. Because and many people say that we could just listen to ourselves, but we can't do that. Our senses have been directed to the outward threats. We have good eyesight, we have good sense of smell and hearing and all of that, because all the threats came from the outside that wanted to eat us, or was not good for us historically. So, and the sense of our inner state would just be in the way and disturbing, making noise for that sense. So it's not only that we haven't developed a sense of feeling our stress level, but it has been muted so that it didn't disturb it. So, and now we have the heart rate that can be, in some sense, then a substitute for the sense that we never needed to develop. So, and I'm happy that there are commercial interests behind it, so that there's money, we follow the money, that there's money behind this on the preventative side of medicine, and not only on the reactive side, but also on this proactive side.
I love it. So speaking of enjoying life, being able to enjoy life and adventure, now Janet and I have another reason to go to Norway, not just to see her cousins and family, but we would love to meet you someday.
Yeah. Just drop by if you come to Oslo. You should see Norway. It's a beautiful country. Yeah, just as beautiful as the US, So.
Yeah, we really should. So I appreciate you so much, Dr. Færø. Thank you for helping us realize our goal on our podcast today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me here.
And listeners and viewers, thank you for tuning in to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham today. Tune in Monday to our regularly scheduled podcast, 12:30 to 1:30. JJ Johnson, Dr. JJ Johnson will be talking about PCOS. So tune in Monday, 12:30 to 1:30. Thank you.